A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the book called Kitab al-Ghaibah by An-Nomani, chapter 2 talks about the tafsir or a certain interpretation about the verse وَاتَصَمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا, which comes in Surah Ma'idah verse 103. So the narration is something like this. What happens is that there are a group of people from Yemen who have come to meet the Prophet. And this is how the Prophet describes them. He says, رَقِيقَةٌ قُلُوبُهُمْ وَرَاسِخٌ إِيمَانُهُمْ. So the Prophet is saying that these individuals, they are not ordinary Muslims. Their hearts are tender and their faith is firm. The Iman is strong. He goes on to say that from amongst them there is a man by the name of Al-Mansur. And Al-Mansur will come with 70,000 soldiers who will help my successor, my wasi, and also he will help the descendants of my wasi. So these people, they get really excited. They're like, "O Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, tell us, who is this wasi?" So the Prophet, he doesn't tell them straight away who it is. He doesn't mention the name of Imam Ali. He starts reciting certain verses from the Quran to sort of indicate to them of who Imam Ali basically is. And he starts off like this. So verse 103 of Surah Ma'idah, he says, وَاتَصَمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold on to the rope of Allah, all of you, and do not separate out into different sects. So these people, they become more excited. Then the narration says that, O Prophet of Allah, tell us, who is this Hablullah? Now, I have not translated the word Hablullah on purpose because the topic of discussion is Hablullah itself. And obviously there are different translations. So the narration goes on and says that they ask the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, what is the Hablullah? So the Prophet, he recites verse 112 of Surah Ma'idah. He says that, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Zuribat alayhimu zilla aynama thuqifu illa bihablin min Allah wa hablin min ar-rasul wa abu bighadabin min Allah. So this verse says that zillat means to be base, to be ignoble, to be despicable. So this thing of being despicable was stamped on them, except wherever they went, and then except for those who grasped onto the rope from God and the rope or the habl from the people. So really, these companions start asking, and they're like, what does this mean? What does this word mean? What does the habl mean? So now, before we actually go into the tafsir of this verse, let's quickly look at the context. What was this verse about? If we look at so this is verse 112. If we go to verse 110, it's talking about the people of the book, Ahlul Kitab, so the Jews and the Christians. And it says that because these people did not believe in God and His Messenger, wherever they went, this thing of being lowly, base, wild, this state of being insulted in front of God was pushed on them, except if they held on to this rope from God and this rope from the people. So here, the Prophet says that the Hablullah is the Kitab, the Quran basically, and the Hablun Minan Nas is the Wasi. So here there is a discussion that we need to look at, that what does this mean? So from this verse, we can derive 4 possibilities. The first is, now obviously, bear in mind that God is addressing the Ahlul Kitab, but this verse is come in the book of God, so it applies to all of us and all times. So what happens is that there are four possibilities. One is that somebody doesn't hold on to the book of God, it doesn't hold on to the wasi itself. The second is you might hold on to either one, i.e. you only take the book, you leave the wasi, like we saw after the death of the Prophet, or you only take the wasi, you leave the book, or you take both of them. Now, except for the last one, in which you hold on to the wasi and the book itself, there is no insult. There is no insult in front of Allah. And we see this today. We see people all over the world who have nothing to do with religion. They don't care about the book. They don't care about the wasi. And what happens is that these people, they end up doing actions that is not just despicable in the eyes of God, but even it looks bad in front of us. Today, or rather yesterday, one thing is wrong, today it is right. Something that was considered a sin amongst the ordinary people, and then today it's fine. Then you have people within the Muslim community itself who only grab onto the book. They don't take the wasi, i.e. they don't look at Imam Ali. What happens is that after the Prophet, these people just stuck to the book. Hasbuna kitabullah, as somebody said. So what happens is that when you only take the book and you leave the wasi, you have your own interpretation, I have my own interpretation, and it's all about what I think is right. It's not about the facts anymore. Then on the other side, we have people who only stick to the wasi. They leave the book of God aside. And when this happens, we sort of lose track of what God wants, because at the end of the day, the wasi, the Ahlul Bayt are here to take us to Allah. Allah is the center of the universe. So you have these extremes as well. But on the other side, when you take the book and you take the wasi, what happens is that we understand that the Quran has a certain kind of nature. It has Allah wants to give us a certain message. But the issue is that these verses are not clear. And obviously you have to bear in mind that Allah is addressing people for all ages and all times, different categories. So many times what happens is that we don't know what is our exact responsibility. And it is for this reason that we have to go to the wasi itself. So the book and the wasi, because it is the job of the wasi. Actually, before I come to the wasi, let's take one step back. If we only stick to the book, the Quran itself in Surah Nahl says that Inna anzalna ilaykal zikr litubayyana linnas. So Allah Himself is telling us that we have reminded the Quran, which is a zikr, so that the Prophet explains to us. And when the Prophet himself, for example, on the day of Ghadir, he says, Man kuntu mawla fahaza aliyun mawla. So for this reason, you have to take the book and you have to take the wasi. When we cling on to both, then what happens? We don't go into different sects. And when this happens, then we understand what God wants from us, what exactly is our responsibilities. Then we are able to understand how we obey Allah, how we worship and how we go close to Him. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.